Good morning, everyone. So, it is an absolutely lovely Sunday morning here in Gothenburg, and today you and I are going to talk a little bit about Docker. Yes! Let's talk about Docker. So, Docker, what is Docker? Let's start by defining Docker. Docker is a container system for application development or for applications. And what does that mean? Well, basically it means that Docker is basically a way of standardizing deployment and the delivery and packaging of different applications. What does that mean? See, these things get really tricky when you don't have prior knowledge of, it's like a catch-22. You need to know what it is in order for you to be able to know what it is. But I'll break it down as much as I can. So it used to be the case that you would have a single large massive application, like a large, basically just a big folder where all of your basic like application code lived, right? Or a binary or a jar file or something like that. And it used to be the case that in order for you to run these things, you would simply copy the files to like some computer somewhere that is running on the interwebs, and that would be the end of the story. In fact, there is such a thing, there are tools such as Chef and Salt and Puppet, and there are a few more. I know the others, but I can't remember exactly what the names are now, but there are a few more of these environmental assistance tools, if you will. And basically these tools have been designed in order to make it very easy for operations people to create different configurations and deploy different applications to a cluster of computers, because large companies have a lot of they have a lot of systems, and it gets really tedious and really complicated for you to manage all of those systems. If you have you have to do SSH into each box and copy things manually, it's really error prone. And that's why things such as Chef, which is probably the biggest name when it comes to this stuff, these tools were developed so that you could basically create a configuration that would simply allow you to, in a very effective manner, just set up a new computer which is going to run certain applications and so forth in a very easy way. Now, what does this have to do with Docker? Well, Docker is basically another take on solving this exact problem. The idea is that you have, as you're working on your local environment, you set up basically just a file. It's basically just a Docker file, if you will, where you declare what type of environment you want your system, like this application that you're building, what it's going to have. And then there are more things, of course, going on than that, but the basic idea is that when you have said that this is what's going to happen, Docker is going to go out to the repository. It's going to pull down a container or an image, if you will, that suits your needs. So let's say that you're creating a web application where your code needs to have access to Apache. You're making a PHP thing. Then you would need to have a container or an environment that has PHP installed, and Apache, and whatever else you're using. And Docker is basically, all it does is that it pulls down this image, like all the dependencies that you need, and wraps your application in a box around it. And then it starts it up on your local computer without you needing to install these things in your own environment. And what's powerful about this is that now all of a sudden you can think of it as putting your application in a box that can be managed it can run the same on any environment. You can install Docker on almost any computer, and you can deploy almost regardless of environment to any computer, and your system, your application, will be run by Docker. And this has kind of brought on this era where it used to be a lot of hassle to create multiple systems and maintaining a large quantity of different applications in a distributed system, because there's so many, when you have so many smaller services, it gets really tedious for you to manage all of them. But Docker allows you to do this in a very effective manner, because all you do, the environment that's going to run your stuff, it doesn't care about files, doesn't care about anything. All you're sending is virtually a single file. Well, not exactly a single file, but that's basically the idea. Think of it as putting all your stuff in a zip file and sending it over to the environment, and Docker knows how to solve, how to just start up and run your application. This is just a fraction of what Docker does. You can do everything from having containers that have databases in them that connect to your container, that is the application container. Docker is such a massive system. Like, it can do so many cool things, and it's made in Go, which is awesome. And basically, there are 3 main things you need to know about Docker, except for Docker itself. There are 3 tools that are Docker specific. It's called Docker Compose, Docker Machine, and Docker Swarm. Now, Docker Compose is a way for you to declare, let's say that you have a cache, like you have a Redis container, that basically a Docker box that holds Redis, and then you have a Docker box that holds your application, and finally you have a Docker box that holds the database that your application needs. Docker Compose is a way for you to orchestrate these things, so you can put a configuration file and say, hey, I want all of these 3 containers to run whenever I run the command, like to run everything. I want you to spin up all of these containers, and I want you to connect them together in this way. It's just a container management system, if you will. Docker Machine is the next iteration of something like that, where you can deploy virtually different containers to different environments. You can hook it up, this system, like this tool, to different hosts like Amazon and Google Cloud and so forth, and you can manage and create Docker containers on different environments. It's very cool. It's extremely powerful. And then you have Docker Swarm, which is even more fancy, where basically Docker Swarm allows you to manage large clusters of containers. That's probably the easiest way that I can explain it in a reasonable amount of time. And because I'm running short on time, I'm just going to go to the next thing, which is going to be Kubernetes. Now, Kubernetes is a tool that allows you to do Docker container management. It is the go-to tool, hands down, for anybody who wants to do really large-scale systems. Docker Compose and like Docker Swarm and Docker Machine are great tools, but Kubernetes, in my opinion, is even better, as it's even more powerful. And it's designed to do, like, if you are working on, let's say that you do Google Cloud Platform, which is what I do. I work with Google Cloud for the most part. Then Docker and Kubernetes is basic, like it's everyday stuff. You do it all the time. All the time is a strong word, but it's the way that they run Google. Like, for the most part, you're going to interact with Google Cloud, that entire platform. So, and it's actually, it is very nice. I have to say, like, I would hate. I mean, I remember when I was working with, when we were managing things at Ticketmaster, we didn't have all access to all these nice tools. I mean, when I was there, they were just starting to think about maybe adding Chef into at least the stuff that we were handling. They were using Chef, to be fair. It's not like it was all bad. Like, they had it in places, but they didn't have anything even close as nice as Kubernetes and Docker in place. And to give you a bit of context, it used to be older companies used to have operations guys, like entire operations team, and some of them still do. It's like, if you have an older infrastructure, they actually still need these things. But Docker and Kubernetes have allowed you to actually make things like managing large systems so effective that you can actually run it with just a few people. I mean, at my company, we're like the entire company's infrastructure, the entire business, and we're catering to hundreds of thousands of users and millions, if you will, every month. It's all run. It's being run by me and like a few other guys. That's it. You don't need all that much. You need to know how it works, of course, but it's a very effective way to handle large systems. Now, before you go and say, hey, I'm going to run everything in Kubernetes, I'm going to do Docker, yada, 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 don't do that. Don't do that. Because the only time in my opinion, you should be thinking Kubernetes and Docker is when you have a system that is already being like where you have so many users, or you want to scale, or you're getting some investors or money or something like that, where you need to, you know, take your company or your application to the next level. Don't start with this. Don't, for the love of God, don't make it your first stop. Learn. If you like learning, just play around with it. It's great fun, and you're going to find it very useful. And there's a lot of people looking to hire people who know this stuff. But don't start with it. What you should start with is either just a regular monolithic application that you, as I say, you just copy the files over, like SCP or something like that, over to the environment, and you run it there. Something like Heroku or like any of these other hosts, that they have this kind of streamlined for you if you just want to make something small. So start there, or you can look into serverless. I use serverless for my own startup. More specifically, I use Firebase. And it's also it's very effective. Like, I don't have to do much in terms of management. It makes me very productive very quickly. So it's a great start. And then when you have like users and you see that, hey, I need a stronger database, or basically you need things that the small, like that Firebase can't give you, or that the small scale thing that you built can't provide anymore, then you transition into Docker and Kubernetes and all of that stuff. That's at least my opinion. The only time I would say that Docker is like a good first bet is if you're working with a system that has a lot of, it's for local development. I absolutely love Docker. I have Docker installed on my local computer, because I think it's very nice that I don't have to, like, say I want to start a project, and I don't want to have to like install Redis on my computer. I don't want to have to install MongoDB and all of that stuff. Then Docker is awesome, because I can download the images that have these databases, spin them up in Docker, and now I have them. And if I don't want them anymore, I'll just remove the images, and that's it. So Docker is, I will go as far as to say, for modern large-scale development, you should know Docker. It's almost, in my opinion, as important to know Docker for large-scale systems as it is to know Node for front-end development. Hopefully this was useful to you.